So, hello everyone. Thank you. And at first, it might seem that these two words, digitalizing and sense making, are somewhat contradictory. At least in the world we live in, we see a lot of digitalization that actually serves procedures that are not necessarily always meaningful. So, the field of philosophical health is all about sense making, all about the why, and not only the how. However, it is also about the how in the sense that it is a field of research that is very concerned with how our thoughts, worldviews, mindsets are aligned with our practices. And until now, this field has been both embedded in theory. What is philosophical health? How does it distinguish itself from psychological health, physical health, and also embedded in practice? So I am myself a philosophical counselor, so I help individuals make sense of their life on one-on-one sessions. And now the talk today is a prospective exploration of how we could use today's digital techniques, artificial intelligence techniques, to enrich this approach via a human in the loop collaboration. So first, a little bit of background in terms of overview, the model that I'm using. This is a representation that follows a challenge that I received, maybe some 1-2 years ago. Someone asked me, can you summarize your entire research in one graph? So I came up with this. And this is also the cover of my latest book, Philosophical Health, A Practical Introduction. So this is the sign I use for philosophical health, combining the infinite of philosophy and the cross that is associated with care. Today I'm going to talk only about this method. I use usually two methods in conjunction with each other, one for individuals, one for groups. The SMILE PH method, which is going to be our focus today. SMILE stands for sense-making interviews looking at elements of philosophical health. And I'm going to go through the 6 elements. I usually combine it with collective workshops using the crealectic method, which is more a method for creativity, which has 5 steps, but I'm not going to enter into details unless you ask me later. The core of it is how do we enrich our existences, because I believe this is ultimately what we are engaged in, although we might use different strategies to actualize this enrichment. Some cultures tend to favor financial enrichment. This is not new. It's not getting better if we look at what's going on in the USA, for example. This is, of course, holistic enrichment that combines a care for the person, care for the earth, care for work, understood generally at anything that we engage in that modifies the world, and care for society. So let's now enter into the sense-making method. So, a little bit of context. This method is a method I have been using with individuals, both individuals that are coming to me in isolated form, as from the civil society, but also in some corporations, namely, as I mentioned in my abstract, Vattenfall, and more specifically, Vattenfall Research and Development. So Vattenfall is an energy transformer that you probably heard of if you live in the Nordics. And I am working with them since several years, and I use both the creolectic method and the SMART method in what I sometimes call philosophical engineering. And the main concern of this enterprise is what they call holistic energy systems. How can we foster systems that are more holistically healthy? And the core concept of my approach, both here and in the other method, is not only the sense of the possible, which you see here, I'll talk a little bit more about it, but also what I call, after philosopher Leibniz and mathematician, the compossible. So to make a world, you need possibles, but also you need these possibles to be compossible. And this kind of mindset is, I believe, what we need to address the numerous global challenges that we have today. We've been very good in the last 300 years at thinking possibly to create amazing, fascinating, mesmerizing new possibilities, but we're not that good at seeing how these possibilities are compatible with others. So we might create a great technology and then observe 50 years later that for our systemic place in the world, that this technology was not so great. So more concretely, we're talking about then a set of 8 sessions, one-on-one, 45 minutes each, where I go with the person through 8 steps. So here you see 6 steps, and then there's an introduction and a conclusion. The 6 steps, the 6 elements that I believe, and after namely a study, well, several years of counseling, but this method was designed when I was conducting a study with people living with spinal cord injury, and where it was shown that in order to have them explain what their philosophy of life might be, there was a certain epistemic injustice in addressing these big questions directly with people who have never been studying philosophy, for example. So I felt I had to design a more gentle method that would lead to this sort of metacognitive overviews, philosophical overviews in a more gentle way. So if you had a session with me, we would start with an introduction for me to get to know you. Then we'd have a session of 45 minutes where we'll only focus on your bodily sense, how you perceive your body, how you live with your body, how it may have evolved through time. And it's a semi-structured method. So within each of these spaces of dialogue, you are free to communicate whatever you want, provided we stay on the theme. We'll then go through your sense of self, your relationship with yourself, your sense of belonging. And you see the ambiguity, the intentional ambivalence of the word sense in English, right? It's both how you feel about it, but also what's your interpretation? How do you make sense of it? We'll then proceed to the sense of the possible, which, by the way, since we talked about philosophical health, that's for me the definition of health from a philosophical perspective. Health equal sense of the possible. Can be low, can be high, in the spinal cord injury study, we've seen that people who were able to reinvent themselves and have a good life, despite the fact that 95% of their body is paralyzed, they exhibit a very high sense of the possible. Conversely, we see people who look very normal and healthy from a medical perspective, and yet their sense of the possible is very low. We finish with a session on the sense of purpose, extremely important today, especially young people. A lot of young people are wondering about purpose. I'm going to start in 3 weeks a series of in-house philosophical counseling for the students of the Stockholm School of Economics. And we all remember being 20 and trying to figure out, what is this world I'm in and what am I meant to do? And unfortunately today, a lot of this existential questioning, which I feel is normal, is translated by our societal discourse, which tends to be pathologizing, which means that we tend to transform too many things into diseases, right? So we talk about mental health of the students. I think that, in fact, in 80% of the cases, there's absolutely no mental health issue. There is just existential questions. There is both fear, anxiety, but also desire to make sense of our lives, and it's absolutely normal, especially in an age where we know now that the brain is not completely finished in its metacognitive functions, to really find our purpose and align it with our action. So, and then the last, almost last, because then there's a conclusion, but the last element of philosophical health is what I call the philosophical sense. And this is both our capacity to, analyze our surroundings and life with critical and creative thinking, but also our worldview, the famous Weltanschauung. So our worldview, what is the beginning of explanation that we have for why the world is how it is? And in fact, I would argue that most people act under a worldview, but most people act under a hidden, implicit worldview. And their worldview, when it's implicit, that is not fully aware, might be in contradiction with their purpose or their sense of self, etc. So philosophical health is a lot about coherence between these 6 elements. It's not normative. It doesn't tell you this is how you should live, this is what you should believe, but it tells you, well, if you believe this and you did this contradictory, and this is going to lead to an unhealthy life. So the consequences of which can be then physical or psychological. As you can see, I have not yet talked about digitalizing, but the entire project now is related to keeping this human specificity of dialogue. I very much believe in the fact that we cannot dialogue with an AI chatbot about the important questions of our life. However, I'm not completely anti-technology. So what I would like to devise now, and this is early stage, but I'm starting to talk with computer scientists, machine learning specialists, etc. Can we use digital tools to democratize the philosophical health approach, and also to gather through data a collective insights, which is something I and other people that I'm training now in the method of course, are limited to do on a large scale, right? I do not have a very clear picture of what the hundreds of people that I've helped until now have in terms of collective patterns. So that's what AI can help do. What is the sense of the possible in a given group of 300 people at a given moment, for example? So, and this is why, in order to start creating bridges between the very qualitative aspect of the philosophical health approach through interviews and more quantification, where we could call, on the one hand, assisted counseling, but also, on the other hand, a new wisdom of the crowds, which we don't have, right? Now, if we take the collective aspect of philosophical health, humanity has gone on the moon, or humanity is capable of tremendous technological feats, and yet we're not very sure how we should raise our children. We're not very sure how we should choose the person with whom we're going to live the many years of our lives, or our friends. There are a lot of fundamental aspects of our existence that are very disputed. And so if digitalizing this approach can help us have a real wisdom of the crowds, which will not be just a metaphor. So, and I know that wisdom of the crowds is a mathematical concept also. So I'm very curious to discuss with mathematicians. And so in order to approach things carefully, more quantitatively, always with the human in the loop, and some, of course, critical care in not falling to reductionism. My colleagues and I have devised very recently, this is a very fresh work, what we call a philosophical health compass. So we didn't want to call it a scale, because maybe it will be a scale someday, but we also aware that some scales can be very normative. So it's a compass because it is meant to be administered in dialogue with a person. So, for example, now that the students that I will have in counseling one-on-one at the Stockholm School of Economics, they will be given this compass before and after. So we will see if there are variations. But at the same time, when they're given this compass, they also, as we will see if we have time, they will be also given a set of questions in order to problematize and co-create the scale with us. So not just answer this, but also reflect critically on this. Did it make sense? Which of the stances make sense, etc. So just to give you an example, in the bodily sense, so we have 8 stances for each of the approaches. And again, I approach this endeavor both with excitation and some trembling, because in my field, philosophy, we're very, let's say, careful with normative approaches. For example, what can be normative here? Well, there can be an element of desirability, right? People can read this and say, okay, so if I score well here, then I'm philosophically healthy. And things are not as simple as that, right? So there are strategies by which we can try to mitigate this effect of normativity. One of the strategies that we devise is to alternate positive and negative stances, such that we force the person to really reflect. It's not just automatic. Okay, if I put 5, I'll get a good mark, right? So I feel full of vitality. I feel discomfort with my body, positive, negative. And actually, then we can even discuss with each person, well, what appears to be positive is not necessarily positive in individual context, right? we can imagine a person that is too vital and therefore cannot focus, for example. So the other way by which we are thinking to reduce normativity and increase the co-creation of this approach with the users is that once we digitalize this, we will be able to tell people, well, not only you can evaluate this, right? So completely untrue, rarely true, undecided, often true, completely true for yourself, but you will given the opportunity to add something as a 0.9, but also two of the words in each sentence will be changeable, in my view. This is, again, still speculative, but so what do I mean? Well, for example, here, you'll be able to change vitality, or maybe full also, or feel. Let's say feel and vitality. And let's say that Rahim here goes online and answers and changes and replaces vitality with energy. And let's say we have 100,000 users at some point. Well, if it's only one person that writes energy, it doesn't affect the formulation. But if a certain percentage, and what the threshold is, I don't know. This is something we need to discuss, for example, with mathematicians, specialists of this the quantitative study. But I'm just going to say a number that is just to give you an idea. If 30% or 50%, I don't know, of the people change vitality to energy, the exact same word, we might want, after every 6 months, to modify the scale such that it is slowly adjusted. This is one hypothesis, and there might be many other ways to make this compass dynamic. So, I think you had time by now to read some of these sentences, and you're probably reflecting for yourself, how would I respond to this, right? And that's, if you're doing that, well, you're already engaging in philosophical help. And this is what I'm going to propose now, is that a little pause, a little reflection, breathing is, please read these sentences from the sense of self and meditate on how you would respond for yourself about it. All right. And then please feel free to do the same with the sense of belonging. And before we continue this little interactive exercise, I want to mention the idea, because I talked about AI. So what's the idea behind that? I did say that I don't think it's healthy to have this kind of conversations unlimited with an AI without human supervision. So what is the idea there still in terms of architecture? Well, what we would like to do is that we don't want to force people, for example, if they arrive on a site, to answer all the questions. Maybe they don't want to. So maybe they just want to be proposed one sentence and then have the possibility, do you want to have all the stances, the full compass, or do you want to discuss this? For example, I struggle to feel connected to something greater than me. And then this is where our machine learning trained AI will be trained to have a little conversation with the user about the chosen sentence. For the moment, we're going for machine learning instead of generative AI because we, as you know, generative AI often hallucinates, and we want to avoid that risk, while machine learning can be trained more robustly on both the method via, for example, the book I wrote about it, where I give a strong background for each of the sentences, but also hours of videos that I have with people that can train the AI, etc. But the AI will only go so far. So in my view, we should limit it to a few interactions and then have a human in the loop. So this is why here the fact that 12 people are located all over the world are currently being trained in the method and certified, this will be useful because, and this is ongoing. So let's say that when the app is ready, there are 20. Because then we want to make sure that whenever the machine learning system is, I'm anthropomorphizing it, but unsure of the answer, says, well, I really don't know. That's refreshing, right? An AI that says, I really don't know, although we have systems by which this is starting to be put in configuration. But I don't know, would you like to discuss this with one of our counselors? And then the counselor takes over online, and then, of course, it can all go all the way through the 8 person taking the 8 sessions. So this is, again, the kind of architecture we're thinking about. It's happening now. So anyone watching this in January, February, March 2025 is welcome to contact me if you want to co-create this adventure. Another little meditative pause. Please consider the sentences here regarding the sense of the possible and how you resonate with them personally. One could ask, what's the difference then between this compass and the one-on-one dialogue sessions? Well, extremely large, because, of course, first of all, during this dialogue, I do not ask these questions. I do not transform this into questions. And we have a much more personalized, bespoke conversation, right? The person talks about their life. And there is a constant balancing between the first person experience and what the sense making. While here we only have general stances that then should introduce to a more personal reflection. So you could say it's almost the opposite dynamic, right? From the particular to the general in human dialogue, from the general to the particular in this digital setting. Sense of purpose, if you want to look at some of these stances and see how they resonate with you. And last but not least, the philosophical sense. So as I told you, one of the real life case studies that I have for implementing my approach, and let's focus here on the SMILE PH method, is Vattenfall R&D. So Vattenfall, as you know, they are engaged in the purpose of facilitating fossil-free energy system, but they also engage in some existential challenges that I will not enter into detail, but that are simply determined by the fact that, well, the world is changing, the actors are changing, a lot of the very, very rich companies that were built on the exploitation of oil are now coming in the more sustainable market with a lot of means, which creates a new, let's say, hierarchy. Those who might have been big in the past might not be so big in the present. But more to our point, while Vattenfall and R&D are very interested in practicing through several managers or employees at different scales the SMILE method one-on-one with me, in which, by the way, the personal story intertwines with the corporate story, because one of the truths of philosophical health is that no matter how much we try to separate our different roles in life, we are nevertheless one. So there is a limit to our trying to fragment our identity. And so there is a desire to have this, for example, reflect on what's the leader of tomorrow through the SMILE method, through some collective workshops, and through the kind of AI-enhanced journaling or self-reflection that I mentioned before through the SMILE method. But at the moment, the desire is a little bit paused due to concerns that several companies might have in the use of AI, right? So there is a movement that, at the moment, I think it's the theme of Davos, which is own your own intelligence. So a lot of companies are concerned with where do they store their data when they use AI. There are, of course, the traditional issues of privacy, confidentiality, and that's a philosophical question too. Because if you ask me, I would say, well, if we imagine a fully philosophically healthy society, would it be a transparent society where you know everything about me, I have nothing to hide, I know everything about you? Or will it be a society that still puts emphasis on privacy, but then which privacy? What should be kept private if we are philosophically healthy? And those questions are questions that need to be answered. And there you see that the approach is to always try to have by design, a whole picture, which I call philosophical engineering, right? Rather than have this narrow focus and create this great tool and then realize, which happens very much in technological companies, is that they have this great invention, then they propose it to society and people don't want it, although it's a great invention. And the reasons for why people refuse it might be, are ideological and therefore philosophical. So, as I mentioned, so the idea would be that and this is something that is likely to happen in a form or another this year at Vattenfall R&D. I say in a form or another because the question mark is, would we have the digital app to go with it, or will it only be analog? So it would be a triple sense-making methodology if we had both the individual sessions, the cycle of 8 individual sessions with participants individually one-on-one with me, both collective workshops, for example, to determine what's the leader of tomorrow. And the third would be this bridge, this digital bridge that would allow us also to gather this wisdom of the team, this collective knowledge about the team. So very curious about how difficult it will be to implement this, both for legal reasons and technological reasons. But technological reasons, I don't think it's very complicated. So I'm almost done. This, I think I talked about, right? The idea that what AI brings, AI is not going to be better than a certified, trained philosophical counselor at having an exchange. I'm sorry, it's not. But AI is going to be much better at gathering collective insights if there are a lot of users. And so we can combine both. And then, of course, then the question is, will this increase groupthink or will it diminish groupthink? And so one of the aspects, you've seen that in the census, one of the aspects of philosophical health is that it is supposed to help people retain their autonomy of thinking even when they belong to a strong community. That's it for today in terms of me talking, but I'm happy to discuss with you. This is just a little indication that we're thinking of creating a research group. For the moment, I call it free philosophical health research in existential enrichment. And as a final note, you might or might not be aware that the Swedish government, since we are in Sweden, asked the health society, Folkhälsomyndigheten, to produce a report on existential health. So existential health is a construct that was proposed by the World Health Organization. It is very close to philosophical health. It's not exactly the same, but it is a good sign that the Swedish government and the health agency are thinking about this questions, because it might indicate that not only in healthcare, but in other contexts, there is an open door for thinking in terms of existential and philosophical health.
Thank you.
Thank you.